Welcome one and all to the final round of today here in Masters Tour Asia Pacific Online. It has been undeniably a grueling day of Hearthstone for all of our competitors left in the tournament. But what is also undeniable is how exciting it is for the players who are making it through to the top 8. And now, taking a look around here at some of the rest of the matches that we have in round 9, we can see who is just going to be able to clinch their spot in that incredibly impressive top 8.
Yes, and we have a banger of a match coming up first, an Eddie versus Just Saiyan, America's Grandmasters in their own right, and two of the most consistent players throughout the entire history of Hearthstone. Of course, Saiyan had that historic run a couple years ago throughout the HCT circuit, but bubbling under the surface there was Eddie grinding away, getting to the playoffs all time, and recently having that big breakout performance in Masters Tour Bucharest. So now we're going to see pretty much the best of the best that America's has to offer clashing in this next match.
You'd think so, wouldn't you, given that that was on our spreadsheet, the matchup that we were told going to be happening, but it turns out I've been baiting you all along, Gia, and it is in fact going to be LPXHope versus Juristis as our next match coming up here as one of the other matches happening in round 9. LPXHope, we know to be a Chinese Hearthstone player. Haven't seen him up close and personal in the competitive scene for all too long, but Juristis is a player that I know a little bit more recently from performing fairly well in the Battle Rift tournament, I believe, taking down that tournament just a little while ago, which was a great initiative to get a little bit of extra third-party tournament scene rolling. But down at this point, both trying to find that spot in top 8.
Yes, I am very upset that my great spiel was wasted there, but of course, we have nothing but glowing words to say for these two players. Of course, LPXHope has also had a very long history in the Hearthstone scene. I think some ups and downs here and there because, as Sodal was mentioning, China at one point was not seen as a very strong region, but very much spearheaded by Lion and this whole team league series and a more qualification-based system, different from the invites that they used to do. I think it's really just created a bigger sample size to really show who the most consistent players are and have them excel. So now we're going to see a representative from China up against Juristis. And you mentioned Battle Rift, another not mainstream circuit of tournaments, but also one that I would like to laud for helping players get a large sample size of matches under their belt to really see if they're consistent at the top level of play.
As would I, Gia. Juristis at 6-2. While I have not taken a look at the tiebreakers, it seems unlikely that he would be able to get through to the top 8, even if he does take a win here. If LPXHope, on the other hand, 7-1, all is on the line here to take the win. But even so, it's got to be said, at 7-2, even if you're not making the top 8, it's still a huge difference. You're bumping up to a much bigger prize pool, around $3,500, I believe. And also, at 7 wins, you get invites to the next 2 Masters Tour events, which is a big difference to these players because those qualifications can be tough.
Oh, for sure. Whether it's through ladder or through the qualifiers, it is a grind. So being able to make back the time you spent in preparation through the monetary compensation of the tournament, on top of that, getting the qualification, I would say is a double-sided benefit. And we are going into a matchup now where Juristis is on the Dragon package of the Druid that we've seen very often throughout the past few weeks, and LPXHope on a less conventional build of warrior, more leaning towards control, with the Bleed Storms in there, with the Kargath and Prime in the deck, and also Galakrond.
Yes, it's kind of the standard version of Control where I've seen from a few of the players, clearly demonstrating its game plan from the Mulligan alone. Keeping Brawl in the starting hand is such a far cry from what you'd be going for in the traditional Egg Warriors, where you're trying to tempo out your opponent. In this matchup, however, clearing the board is the name of the game, trying to purely exhaust them of resources. And while it's not an especially quick win condition, Galakrond can give you a little bit of extra punch to get there once the Druid starts fatiguing.
That's right. And when we think about traditional control decks in this meta, there really haven't been very many. The slow decks tend to have some type of combo at the top end to try and close out games, or they're mage and they're trying to scam you, or they're priest and they're trying to scam you. Whereas this warrior, it seems, is a lot less in the realm of random card generation, and it's much more predictable what they can do. However, in exchange for that, they have a lot more consistency for their board clears. The natural brawls in the deck, the natural blade storms are answers for the types of boards that Druid like to put together, especially the Mount Seller. Warrior is probably one of the few classes that wouldn't break a sweat trying to pick apart this board state. But I wonder if all of that AoE can actually get there against round after round of refill, especially when Ysera Unleashed comes down.
I mean, we say after round of refill, even though it's nothing too impressive right now. The card draw is definitely lacking for Juristis at the moment, and so for XHope,
Sure.
his own development on his side of the board, I think will be able to quite quickly outpace what Juristis is throwing down, just in terms of tempo, because it's not like he can't do anything. There is clearly Dr. Boom and the bomb package in the deck, which will very, very quickly populate the board as soon as he finds a Wrench Caliber.
I guess too many hours spent watching APAC and Tice, I guess, has rotted my brain into assuming that every druid starts with Fungal Fortunes or gets to overflow at some point.
True.
However, I do think Juristis has plenty of time to get into those draws, and at the very least has an Emerald Explorer to follow up this turn and possibly a dragon for the next following turn. But for XHope, he could pick up some dragons of his own for that tempo game plan you were talking about. The Dr. Boom was available, but no bomb procs quite yet. Corsair Cash will draw him into Wrench Caliber guaranteed, though, because he's already played Ankar. So it will actually be kind of a clock for Juristis to get his threats together.
Starting to stack up very, very nicely. Well, I was going to say 4-3, a 3-3 Wrench Caliber with just +1 durability into the Horde Pillager as well, potentially getting back another one. This could just be, unless we see a strong development from Juristis, XHope just getting ahead that little bit too quickly, because again, it's the tempo that's really doing it for him. His Shield Slam to just cleanly take out this Emerald Explorer as well is such a big tempo swing.
And we see there from Juristis a micro decision of whether or not he wanted to use the Poisonous onto the Evil Quartermaster or just send this face. I think that if he's removing a 2-3, it's such a marginal benefit that he would rather send the face damage in. And also, there wasn't immediately an answer for the 2-3 on board. I don't mind that at all. And on the follow-up, he did pick Ysera as the highest value option for him. Not quite Ysera Unleashed, but it's getting to a point that because the bomb train is starting, Juristis will also not be in the greatest of hurries to draw through the majority of his deck.
And while Juristis has not found the card draw, he has found good card after good card. Getting Emerald Explorer, getting the Mount Seller, finding Ysera is incredibly impactful here. And it does definitely mean the XHope having used both of his Shield Slams, it's going to be a little bit difficult to completely clear that board so that he can get Blastmaster Boom down. It's
true. And just that 4 health on the Porcupine and the nerf to Corsair Cash is coming in huge here. Had the Wrench Caliber still had 4 attack, he could simply clear the Porcupine and then Blade Storm away that Ysera. Instead, XHope is going on the offensive here, not seeing a way to deal with the Ysera very easily. And I can get behind this for sure. I think XHope is at a safe enough health total where he doesn't need to worry about Ysera generating an additional spell. He is making Juristis sweat a little bit.
Makes sense to go with the Ysera Awakens as well. It was no real way to make the outcome more likely that Ysera survives, sorry. Obviously with any minion taking a whole bunch of damage before it soaks up the bombs. But still, it just clears the board and keeps Juristis ahead on tempo. And now that Blastmaster Boom has gone, XHope's game plan really does just go back to removal. He does not have those strong tempo gains of his own.
Yeah, and turned out that because Juristis board states have never been Glowfly-centric, or he's already used that first Mount Seller, the Brawl has not really found a window to be particularly effective here. So we're going to see XHope just use Blade Storm to clear off the Ysera. Again, kind of unfortunate the way the Boombots actually went. If they had left a little bit more health in the Ysera, that actually would have dealt more damage to the Emerald Explorer. and then he could have Wrench Calibered it down. Some strange interactions going on here. But we could see XHope still deal with this if he wants to commit Risky Skipper. It is quite expensive though, because he doesn't have Battle Rage this turn.
He doesn't Battle Rage, I feel like, at the moment.
Sure.
Given that he still just has, you know, a decent hand he can remove for the time being, and this also just gets him a pretty tremendous amount of armor, which, again, gives him that little bit of extra time where he can leave minions on board.
And at the very least, Galakrond is some measure of card draw.
True. Very true.
Not negligible. Juristis can refill with Mount Cellar, but it's only 2, nothing too impressive. I'm definitely eyeing the Twin Tyrant here instead.
Yeah, it just looks pretty clean. And again, I think Juristis can realize at this point that throwing down a single big minion is actually very good at this point. It's not traditionally very powerful against Control Warrior, but with both Shield Slams gone, he knows that Brawl is the best removal option he has, or I suppose another Blade Storm now if he wanted to warrant that. But it's just awkwardly statted for XHope to deal with.
Yep, XHope, they're saying that I'm not going to spend my whole turn trading an Armor Smith and going for Blade Storm. That is his last Blade Storm, so he wants to hold on to it for some more symmetrical removal, because Juristis will definitely have Brawl on his mind from this point onward. Probably not going to commit a board if he can't stick the Soul of the Forest on top of it, in which case XHope will be hoping to still have that Blade Storm as an option.
Exotic
the
Mount
overflow
Cellar
has arrived.
Yeah, it was undeniably an option on that turn to try and go a little bit wider. But again, I think this speaks to what Juristis knows about this game plan. One threat at a time. You really don't have to commit that much for it to be over-committing, I think, here. As he just needs to make sure he has something to play at all points to bridge the gap to Ysera.
There's 4 bombs in the deck by my count right now. Okay. Not negligible whatsoever. And it's awkward for Juristis. It's not to a point where he can hope to just overdraw them because that Ysera is still in there, as you mentioned. XHope gonna pull the trigger on his Galakrond because he has drawn the Kronks now. Definitely wants to get the Battle Cry value. Does not hit the Kargath, which I would say is the premium option, but at the very least, it is a threat to be put on board. So there's an option to go for a Mount Cellar, some spells, and then the Innervate Soul of the Forest on this turn. I think that looks like a very powerful option to play around a single Brawl. Juristis, at this point, probably can't afford to be too scared of Brawl plus the second removal, whether it be second Brawl or Blade Storm.
Yeah, I mean, I think if he sees Brawl, he would be pretty ecstatic, to be perfectly honest, because as long as he doesn't die from the bombs in the next few turns, of course, having Ysera with no Brawls left in the deck looks like a winning combination.
Juristis taking the free face hit there, knowing that if there's going to be removal on XHope's side, it's going to be symmetrical, so that Armor Smith is dying one way or the other, wants to get the maximum amount of face damage. First Brawl committed, and no way. Warrior 2020, same old Control Warrior, doesn't matter what year it is, and it's going to survive the Blade Storm as well. Pick him up some extra armor on top of it.
Yeah, it's a lot to commit, obviously, to clear off the board with 2 premium removals coming down. But the Soul of the Forest is always difficult for Warrior to deal with. So just getting it out the way and not dying on the following turn is a big deal for XHope, as the first bomb now hits the table for Juristis. The damage is going to start coming very rapidly now.
It is so scary to go for this overflow. A few more bombs in there. He wouldn't die immediately even if he drew all of them because the heal procs first. And it's scary though also because he's going to overdraw some cards. And if Ysera is one of them, that is close to lights out.
I mean, he's overdrawing at least one. He's very possibly hoping it is a bomb, as Ysera is 1 card away from being discarded here. He is going to pray that the next one is a bomb in order to try and mitigate some of that damage. But in the end, it doesn't matter anyway.
It's just huge Kronks into the other Wrench Caliber drawn there for XHope. That was a very aggressive way of playing Control Warrior, I have to say, but I really like the way XHope approached it. He didn't overreact to any board states. He held on to those brawls until it was actually a threatening enough board that he used to clear. And if it was just one big threat, sure, I'm not playing executes, but I can play my own threats and force you to trade with those.
I thought it was a very clever game plan from XHope. It just looked like no matter what the outcome there was from Juristis, he had pretty much the entire game plan mapped out right from the start. He had removal for a big board clear, for multiple big board clears, in fact. And at some point along the way, the bombs would start coming, Juristis would draw into them. It tends to happen in these kind of matchups where one or both of the decks turbo cycle through their deck. You can expect a similar game plan to come into effect every time, which means, of course, that the Control Warrior is out of the way for XHope. His two remaining decks being the Highlander Hunter, which feels all but ubiquitous with its incredibly high bring rate to the tournament, and then the somewhat more interesting Control Demon Hunter to complement his Control Warrior.
And it's so funny that of all of these power classes represented by XHope, it ends up being the Shaman that was banned out here by Juristis. And this is the Totem Shaman with Splitting Axe, not the Evolved Shaman version. And I guess that Juristis thinks that his slower decks could fall prey to this, expecting a ban on his own warrior makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I can see how that Shaman could snowball against Highlander Hunter, against Druid that might not have the immediate answers. It's just funny that this time we see Shaman, it actually gets banned away. What a world we live in.
Truly. And it does mean that for XHope, it's the one kind of aggressive deck that he has left to his name that's going to be going up against the Druid. We've seen this go back and forth, I think, which I think highlights the conclusion that I at least came to during the time we were casting GM, where the Hunter is in a decent spot in this matchup, but it's really got to get going quite fast.
I would agree. And I think the keep we saw yesterday, I can't quite remember which player it was, but they kept Stormhammer Feywing, is very indicative of what the central game plan is, going for mid-range minions, going for continuous sources of damage that can't be easily removed by Druid. So minions that can't be targeted, obviously, in the Stormhammer, they never play Ooze. And so when you give Druid these types of piecemeal boards that can get picked apart by their removal spells, I think that's where Druid can have the opportunity to shine and get the time to play the
oh no!
The Glowfly Swarm, but that was a disaster.
Absolute disaster. Juristis was just thinking, brilliant, finally I can do the powerhouse play against Hunter, what you always want to do of an early Glowfly. But as it currently stands, he's only going to be making 4 Glowflies, and he can't even get it down this turn. Disaster.
That was very, very unlucky. I guess we can always point to this being the potential downside of this more dragon-heavy build of Druid, but still, that is highly unlikely that even one minion would be overdrawn there, and 2 is just kind of would cause me to pull my own hair out. For Juristis, though, not all hope is lost, because when he gets to play the Glowfly next turn, at least it's most likely going to be 5 flies, but seeing the preemptive Faceless Corruptor by XHope kind of is removing the hope from Juristis aside.
Yeah, I love the play from XHope. I think that it was definitely the time to go for Coin into Faceless Corruptor. And I also think he chose the right minion. There was temptation to go for the 1-2, because that can't trade into a Glowfly. But, wow, I mean, I was going to say, because this allows the hero power, it clears one off anyway. But now he just has lethal with Zephrys. I thought he was going to go for Lightning Storm, but you know what? Give me a Savage Roar, and we'll go for that instead.
Give Druid a taste of their own medicine. Turn 5 lethal with Savage Roar. That is pretty much a heartbreaker for Juristis, but I guess you need to accept the built-in failure rate with Druid every so often. I think that in terms of reaching full potential of nutty hands, Druid does that far more often than Highlander Hunter does, but it's a really tough spot for Juristis to be in now, because he has to take wins against Demon Hunter now from XHope. Although it's not the Demon Hunter we're used to seeing, so there's potential here for a reverse sweep, I gotta say.
It's possible, as I think Zephrys is doing a great job there of giving us a little peek preview of Scholarman's Academy with the dual class Hunter Druid cards. Now apparently Savage Draw also fits that description as it was able to take down the game for XHope. But like you say, the Demon Hunter is a little bit of a weird version. I think it's not so traditionally known as being a terrible matchup for the Druid. But I've got to say, I really doubt that it's a good matchup for the Druid, even though it's a slightly different one. Because I think the Control Demon Hunter, it has plenty of removal for the boards, which Aggro Demon Hunter was kind of lacking. And it can also put forward its own very scary boards. Magtheridon is huge. The damage from Metamorphosis and Warglaives is also very scary. I think XHope is in a great spot here.
I would have to agree that Magtheridon is the big threat here, but I'm hesitant to say that the amount of removal that Demon Hunter packs is necessarily enough to get there against a Druid that knows how to parcel out the threats. I don't think Juristis is going to be the type to dump all of his spells with one Mount Stellar if he has the second one in hand, for example. I think that if you put together boards of around 4 minions or a board that also has Soul of the Forest behind it, that can be very problematic for Demon Hunter.
It can. I agree. There's a way to make it more awkward for Demon Hunter, but it really does just stagger me when I see how much removal Demon Hunter can pack into the deck. It's deceptive because Vulpera Scoundrel in its own right can often be an extra bit of removal thrown down. Blade Dance is almost always a guaranteed clear on 3 minions, no matter how big they are. There is for sure a very clear avenue to victory for Juristis here by getting down a big board too early. But I like XHope's chances, I gotta say.
Yeah, and Juristis has whiffed on the early ramp once again, and the Fungal Fortunes. We're going to count that last Fungal Fortunes as a whiff. It essentially didn't even enter the hand for the amount of cards it drew. And XHope's first Vulpera was already a pretty interesting decision. He ended up taking the meta for extra reach. The second one, though, I'm definitely looking at Chaos Strike just to keep his card draw going. But Command the Illidari is an interesting proposition if XHope wants to take a more aggressive role.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like Command the Illidari just because you can play it next turn proactively. Like, forget about clearing the board.
Sure.
As long as they don't have Glowfly Swarm, that can come down and make it more difficult for your opponent to develop onto the board. But in the end, we see Blur.
He goes for mystery choice.
Yeah, exactly. You never really consider, because he didn't like any of those options, it seemed.
Yeah, Blur, I don't feel is going to be particularly useful for XHope. His life total, I think, between the two heroes is the one that's going to be safer throughout the majority of the game. I wouldn't completely underestimate it, though, because against particularly if the Druid decides to go for a big dragon into Ironbark, suddenly XHope can just swing into it multiple times with Warglaives without having to worry about face tanking too much.
I don't know. I guess I was maybe...
finally arrives.
Yeah. That is a big draw for Juristis. But sorry to cut you off. I was just going to say that I guess I underestimated how good Metamorphosis was, or at least XHope anticipated Metamorphosis would be on 5. Because I was just thinking, develop a bunch of 1/1s on turn 5 looks like a great proactive play, but there is a pretty clear upside with this line too.
Yeah, it just allows him to preload that damage, even though it has been nerfed. Getting 2 Metamorphoses is still 16 damage between all of those hero powers, and that is nothing to scoff at whatsoever. However, this Warglaives is very awkward to use on this turn. 1, because it's been nerfed, and 2, because even if it weren't nerfed, the hero power isn't for the attack.
And so therefore, is it just Skull and dump something?
It's tough to say. I don't mind the pre-equip because of Blur, strangely enough, for the next turn.
True. Yeah, what this also says is whether or not Juristis knows this, I think he can make a good guess that anything he plays on this turn will just be instantly cleared off the board, be it through multiple swings of the Warglaives, Blade Dance, Moog plus Chaos Nova as well. There are so many ways to wipe this up.
And it indeed looks like it's going to be some measure of a Blade Dance game plan.
Do you think?
Oh, wow, going for...
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't warrant it necessarily on this turn.
Might be overreacting, but the 8 damage coming the other way looks a bit scary already to me.
That's true. It
But
is a little bit scary.
He did get a Twin Slice for free though, so there's an option to just equip one and then blur and start swinging away.
Demons.
Yeah, unfortunately, the numbers are just a little shy of being super clean here, but with the I-Beam, actually, it works out just fine, in my opinion. He doesn't necessarily need to clear the Ysera, but it's available if he wants. It's kind of an awkward balance of how many charges you necessarily want to go fake with the Warglaze, but since he has Horde Pillager to follow up, I think that works out very nicely for XHope.
Okay, that's pretty sick. I wasn't seeing the Horde Pillager on the same turn line that allows you to attack again. I was more thinking he'd just leave up the Ysera, which looks pretty tempting to me. But by clearing off the board, it does weaken the Iron Bark, gets the damage to face. And all of a sudden, XHope is deceptively close to delivering lethal, I would say, in the next few turns.
It does seem that way, and the key point that he held on to the Blade Dance there, looked for a more efficient way of dealing with the board. It's from how he played his warrior, honestly. He didn't overreact with a brawl on 2 minions, which is essentially what Blade Dance is.
Huge decision point as well there for Juristis, who had the option to take a value trade with the Zixor on the board and heal himself for 5 damage instead. And as I said, it's easy to fall into the trap of saying, I'm at 20 health, I'm not dead for a long time. But by not gaining that 5 extra life, that could be the difference maker that sees him succumbing to all this damage.
Could be, but the pickup of Chaos Nova makes this turn a lot easier. I mean, I was doing some Blade Dance math and doing some odds in my head, but now he can go for Immolation Aura plus the Chaos Nova, just bonk away the 6/3 remaining Mount Seller if he wants, and then Swing Face on top of that, and send the Watermelon. But looks like he's going to go for card draw first, ending up on a Blade Dance game plan, so I suppose.
Interesting. This is... the weird thing to me about this is that it's a lot of damage that isn't going face.
Right.
Just having Moog plus Chaos Nova, sorry, even if he commits 1 extra swing in order to take out the exotic Mount Seller, that's a lot less damage that is being sunk into the minions, because there's only a finite amount of swings with these Warglaves in the deck. Some of them have got to start going face.
Yeah, this is already the second Glaives, and there is just the 1 Horde Pillager, so that other Glaives in hand is the last one. So based on this turn from XHope, I think we can clearly see his head is at playing this as a control matchup. He's not trying to swing to the face entirely and just rush the Druid, but the big problem with that game plan is shown right here. There are 2 Zixor Primes now for Juristis, 1 drawn off the top and 1 in the deck. Very scary stuff.
Very scary indeed, which is why I think XHope does need to start at some point turning this around and going for damage to the face. Chaos Nova is the obvious play to clear off this board on this turn. There's a couple of alternate ways you can go around it, of course. Blade Dance could be used. Moog plus Immolation Aura is also something to consider if you really need 5 mana, but I'm not seeing any way to use that all too efficiently.
Yeah. With XHope prioritizing this Warglaze, I think he's realizing that he needs to start being the aggressor here as well. He's going to go Twin Slice plus Blade Dance, and he can shoot the last remaining Prime if he wants to. Oh, sorry. Was there mana remaining? There was not. So he's just going to send it all face, get the maximum damage there, and make sure that he's setting up lethal in the near future.
Yeah, in terms of actual damage, it's, what, 4, 5, 6? So 1 damage off lethal being set up on the following turn, annoyingly enough.
And a taunt put in the way. That's... Ideally, I think Juristis wanted another dragon to be playable on this turn, but he'll settle for having drawn Crystal Power and getting out of range of certain card combinations from XHope.
And for XHope, this is no problemo whatsoever. I'm thinking at this point, you've got to be looking at Moog Chaos Nova just to clear off the board, because he's seen so much healing at this point. Clearing off this board and getting the damage to face, I think, has to be his top priority here.
Oh!
Ooh, that might change things.
But then he won't have the
Won't clear
mana
the board.
With the it does. With the Moarg Immolation Aura, it deals with the 1/3s, and then the Moarg effect deals with the rest. That is extremely clean.
Yeah, very, very nicely done. Drawing first there so that he had the option to potentially hit Magtherodon. And with our line of play, he would have ended up with nothing on the board. But with his line, he ends up with a 12-12 on the board, which is quite clearly a lot better.
And Juristis does the same thing, essentially. Gives up his whole hand to pay for it, but it is his last chance of staying in this now. XHope does not have lethal quite yet. It's a little bit short.
It's very close, but he also doesn't have a clean answer to the Deathwing as it currently stands.
I-Beam picked up with the Moarg Artificer. It's not enough to clean up the Deathwing, but it heals him out of range of one attack, and also out of the range of a Savage Rart top deck.
Very true. So you start with the draw. Maybe you can find something that changes your mind here. Maybe activate Zephyrus after that card as well, potentially.
And if the Zephyrs were active, he could then pivot to just... He could just use Shadow or Death to deal with it. However, it's not necessarily going to be that, because I think XHope is holding on to Zephyrus possibly for that extra damage he's lacking. With Eldrazi Warblade's pickup, though, doesn't necessarily need additional damage, because I think he has it over 2 turns, plus the minion sticking.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. Again, I think he's left it, in my opinion, closer than it needed to be over the course of this game, because there's still an extra copy of Overflow in the deck, which if Juristis was able to hit, might gain him the health that he needs to outlast this damage and find the dragons in his deck.
Didn't hit any dragons, but that was one of the few fugitives still left him with a shot in this game. However, no other cards are really useful on this turn. Oh man, my inclination is just hero power and hit face.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, what benefit does having a 3-2 or even like a 4-5 actually get you on this board? It's all cleaned up so easily.
The problem with that line, though, is that Juristis needs another turn to survive to set up the Glowflies, at which point that's really not happening. However, if he gives up spells on this turn, then the Glowfly has less shot of delivering lethal over 2 turns. He's just stuck between a rock and a hard place and still needs to rely on some magical dragons off the top to save him.
There's that extra Metamorphosis for more damage coming through. Depending on mana, I don't think it's quite lethal on this turn, but it is incredibly close.
The double meta turn.
Oh no, I take that back.
Oh, it is. Yeah,
it is exact lethal. I was looking at the Eldrazi Warblades, but in the end for XHope, that is all that he needed to close things out. And even though it was a kind of roundabout way to get there, in the end for Juristis, the Druid, again, just falling down, even against these control decks, like the Control Bomb Warrior and the Control Demon Hunter. It's just not winning the game quickly enough, showing how dominant those decks are against the Druid.
Yeah, and honestly, that is not my first instinct. If you tell me a control deck versus Druid who's favored, I feel like Druid has enough threats in there, especially now that they're all running the Dragon package, to eventually run into a turn where the opponent just doesn't have an answer. But Demon Hunter, being that nearly all of its card draw mechanics missed the nerf bat this time around, I think people just keep finding new ways to innovate the deck and draw out new potential. And this control deck, I could see being the way forward. I'm really happy to see that Illidan's not completely out of the meta.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that's what the developers were laying out in their most recent balance patch, was that it was not just what is a little bit too powerful right now, it's opening up the design space for the future. They don't want aggro tempo Demon Hunter to be the only variant that we ever see.